there any thoughts about people coming to this and going, oh, well, this is where this all comes from?
That thought didn't occur to me. A lot of other things do when you're working on these things. That's not one that that jumped out at me. But you're right. This is kind of like the DNA that kind of got started the whole, modern Batman, revival. Which the success of the comic inadvertently led to the movie, the first Tim Burton movie, which of course led to our show, and then everything else. So definitely, it's one of those books that's pivotal and seminal, and you have to treat it with respect. But fortunately, we just everybody who worked on the movie, myself, Jay Oliva, Bob Goodman, the writer. We were all just huge fans of the comics, so it was just all a matter of, trying to find what it was in the original comic that made it what it was, and somehow translate that into a movie.
It is a high bar to meet. I mean, this is the thing.
Probably the highest. Yeah.
What were your concerns as far as that?
Well, anytime you adapt something that's as famous as The Dark Knight Returns and as well loved. You just know going in that not everybody's going to be pleased, that somebody's going to say, oh, well, why did you leave out that one scene with the drunk in the alley? And, and it's just like, you can't put, even though we were fortunate to be able to actually spend 2 whole movies with this one, rather than just one, there were still going to be some things that got left out. But it is what it is, it's like they are 2 different mediums, and you can't spend a whole lot of time worrying about, oh, well, somebody's going to be really upset if we don't make this look exactly like the comic, or if we don't use this exact line of dialogue, or whatever. You just know that going in, and we just do the best of whatever we think we can to make the best movie out of it.
Is there anything very big that you left out that you wish you didn't have to leave out? Or is there...
No, I would say, honestly, there's nothing big that got left out. The thing that's so far that I'm reading online from the reviews of part 1, is a lot of people are upset that we didn't use the voiceover narration, which of course is throughout the entire book. But honestly, I didn't see how we could possibly have done it anyways, because the example I always use is, some of Batman's best one-liners in the comic, they happen right in the middle of an action scene, like when he gets shot in the chest and says, why else would I put a big target on my chest, because I've got the metal plate underneath him. And it's like, there's no way to do that in film. You'd have to slow the whole movie down and have him, explain that while he's falling, So that's just practical. That's just practical consideration. But there's nothing really big that got left out that I think that should have been in there. We had a lot of elbow room because we had 2 movies to spread out in. I think we kind of got all the important stuff in there.
Is there an unwritten rule that says that?
I'm sorry?
Is there a rule, or written or out, or otherwise, that says an animated film for the DC verse can't be more than like an hour and 20 minutes?
No, it's purely budgetary thing. It's literally every minute of film costs X amount of dollars, and we have pretty tight budgets on these things. So, that 74-minute cutoff is basically just for budgetary reasons. It's not like, oh, it's because it's a cartoon, people won't have the patience to sit for it or anything. It's just budget.
Okay, and then why? And that the spot where you split this was actually perfect. Was there any discussion as to where best to split it, or was it just like?
It's a pretty even split. The original comic was 4, thick issues, and we split it like right after issue 2, basically. We jerry-rigged the ending a little bit, moved up the scene with Joker, waking up in Arkham Asylum, moved that to make that the cliffhanger. But other than that, it was pretty obvious where to do it.
So the Dark Knight Returns carries the PG-13.
Yeah.
I heard from a source that there was at one point a killing joke in the works, but got postponed after launch. And do you think this could potentially push animated films into something a little bit more like R-rating?
Well, there is a discussion that comes up every now and then about broadening the marketplace and actually maybe doing an R-rated DC adaptation. For a while there, we were talking about The Killing Joke. I think, especially after the theater shooting this summer, I don't think anybody wants to go that dark with one of these animated movies at the moment. But that possibility does still come up of us doing something a little bit more adult. I mean, that almost happened with Dark Knight Part 2. Part 2 is actually pretty violent in places, and we were actually crossing our fingers that we weren't going to get an R rating and have to go back and cut something out, but we didn't. We got PG-13, thank God. But it could happen eventually down the road. I mean, and it's a tricky thing because you don't want to just say, oh, we just want to make an R-rated Batman movie just for the sake of making an R-rated Batman movie, So it has to be something that feels appropriate for the material. But we'll see. We'll see what happens down the line.
And with the popularity, do you think there'd be potential parts 3 and 4?
Of Dark Knight? Oh, you mean Dark Knight Strikes Again? I would be willing to give it a shot, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, if the numbers come back and are huge, and we get interest from home video saying, yeah, let's do more. I was like, well, okay, it'll be a little bit different than parts 1 and part 2, but.
When you did the episode of the animated series that told the short stories when Dark Knight
Yeah.
was that anywhere in the back of anyone's mind, or was it just a fresh start in terms of style?
Oh, it was a fresh start. I mean, that was just kind of a fluke. That was just kind of a shout out to a beloved classic. When we did the movie, we knew we were going to have to take a completely different approach to the whole thing. For one thing, we wanted to make sure that the art style was a little bit more reflective of the original source material. At one point, and that was difficult. That was a very challenging process to come up with an art style that represented the comic but was still animatable. We were struggling with it for weeks. Actually, we couldn't come up with something that we felt kind of hit all the bases it needed to do. In desperation, we went back and did look at those original model sheets from the Batman the Animated Series episode, and they weren't really helpful. They were too simplified. But so we just had to put our nose to the grindstone and sweat more bullets, and eventually came up with the look we came up with.
Did Michael Ironside enter your mind, having done the voice for that style originally?
I thought Michael was awesome as the older Batman, but we wanted to try something a little different for the movie, and because it's a more high-profile project, we get a little bit more money. We can go for stunt casting. So we wanted to find somebody who was. And again, this is not that Michael Ironside is not any of these things, but we wanted somebody who was kind of iconic back in the 80s and who is also still relevant now, and on top of all that, most importantly, just a really great actor. So Jay Oliva suggested Peter Weller, and everybody just kind of went, oh yeah, perfect. So that's what we went with Peter, and I'm very happy we did.
I'm going to presume that it